Jai Hind everyone. I hope you all are doing great. In our school textbooks, children are taught to blindly worship one man as the father of Indian Renaissance. That man is Rajaram Mohan Roy. We are told he teamed up with the British to save India from its own backwardness, specifically by ending the practice of sati, that we know as Sati Pratha. But when you strip away the whitewashed history and look at the actual documents from the 19th century, a very uncomfortable reality emerges. So let's look at the grand colonial propaganda surrounding Sati Pratha. Did the practice exist? Yes, but where and how often? If we look at our oldest text, that is from the Mahabharata, this lie falls apart immediately. When King Pandu died, his second wife Madri stepped into his funeral pyre. But why did she do it? Was she forced by the society, priest, or the family? She did it out of unbearable personal guilt. King Pandu died because he tried to be intimate with her that triggered a fatal curse. Madhuri blamed herself entirely. And there is the absolute proof that sati was never a common and mandated practice. Pandu's first wife Kunti did not commit suicide or did sati. She lived on and raised the Pandavas and became one of the most powerful figures in Mahabharata. Think about the end of Kurukshetra war. Millions of soldiers died. Did millions of widows commit sati? No. Other famous widow like Abhimanyu's wife Uttara lived on. If sati was a mandatory everyday practice in our society, why didn't these women do it, or why they did not commit sati, or why they were not forced to do sati? Because it was never a systematic rule. It was an extremely rare exception. The British painted it as a daily pan-India epidemic. The actual data tells a completely different story. Let's look at the British East India Company's own records between 1815 to 1828. In an Indian population of roughly 200 million people at that time, the British recorded around 8,000 total cases over those 14 years. It is a very small fraction of the population, and they blew it out of proportion. And here is the most crucial detail, that it was not a nationwide practice. Over 60% of those 8,000 cases were concentrated in just one single area, the Calcutta division of Bengal Presidency. Outside of Bengal and a few specific cases in Rajasthan, sati was virtually non existent. In vast regions of South India, the West, among the vast majority of communities across the Indian subcontinent, sati was completely unheard of. Even in Bengal, modern historians note that local property laws allow widows to inherit the land and the property. It means the greedy relatives sometimes manipulated or forced widows into sati, not for religious purpose but purely for the financial gains. This was a great hyper-localized crime, yet British took these isolated numbers and blew them out of proportion on the global stage. And why? Because the British East India Company needed a moral justification for their brutal rule in India. They needed to paint the entire country as an uncivilized wasteland that is desperately looking out for a white savior. But to make this propaganda believable, they needed a native voice, a local voice. They needed an Indian to validate their superiority, and Rajaram Mohan Roy gave them exactly what they wanted. While Rajaram Mohan Roy rightly wanted social reform, he allowed his voice to be hijacked by the British administration. When British rushed to pass the Sati Regulation Act in 1829, they used this critique of our society to tell the world, look, even their own intellectuals admit their culture is extremely flawed. They wanted someone to tell the entire world, see how bad and how backward is this society. And Rajaram Mohan Roy did exactly same thing for them. But was Rajaram Mohan Roy a champion of Indian civilization? Let's look at his career first. Rajaram Mohan Roy was deeply involved in the British system. He worked as a clerk for East India Company. He collected significant wealth through the British imposed zamindari system, a system that ruthlessly exploited poor Indian farmers. He spoke about the reforms and changes, yet he actively benefited from the very system that British used to bleed India dry and suck their blood and exploit them. And do you know his biggest betrayal was in the field of education sector? In 1823, British government proposed establishing a new Sanskrit college here in Kolkata to promote traditional Indian learning system. You would think that the father of Indian Renaissance would 100% support for this cause, right? He did not. Instead, he wrote a notorious letter to the Governor General aggressively opposing Sanskrit college. So he was against the Sanskrit college. He argued that traditional Indian education was completely useless and demanded that British should introduce an English education system here in Kolkata. So he actually opposed our own education system, but he was completely in the favor of British education system just to please his masters. And this is where the deepest and the most permanent damage was done to our civilization. The British realized that the physical conquest wasn't enough. They needed something to conquer our minds also. So they began setting up schools that systematically brainwashed generations of Indian children. Ancient texts, our advanced sciences, and our profound philosophies were suddenly mocked as backward mythology. Children were taught to view their own ancestors with shame and to look up to the British as ultimate peak of human civilization. So they become great and our own people became inferior. The colonial education system manufactured a profound sense of self-hate. This colonial education system manufactured a profound sense of self-hatred. It taught the Indian children to hate their own culture, to hate their own heritage, and to feel inferior in their own country. Years before British officially decided to create a class of Indian in blood and color, but British in the taste, Rajaram Mohan Rai was already laying the foundation for them. He actively campaigned for the European settlers to take over the Indian land, believing that the wealthy British landlords were the only way to civilize this country through the zamindari system. They didn't just steal our wealth, they stole our self-worth also. They weaponized hyper-localized issues like Sati Pratha and hijacked our education system. They successfully manufactured a generalized Stockholm syndrome. They made millions of Indians genuinely believe that the British were our saviors. Even today, you will hear many people saying that, but British gave us the railways, they gave us democracy and civilization. They made us forget that the railways were built to drain the resources to the ports, and that was our own wealth, our own resources. The British engineered a system where Indian would fiercely defend their own scepters, their own enemies. Rajaram Mohan Rai was the perfect native tool for their civilizing mission. But it is a time we should stop now and break this myth. It is time to break free from this generational brainwashing. Stop seeing our ancient civilization through the eyes of an invader and finally start reading our own history. So if you like this video and you learned something from it, do comment, share with your friends, and also tell them that we have to come out of this Stockholm syndrome. Our cognitive dissonance has completely destroyed our society, and we have been believing something that somebody wanted us to believe. That's all from my side. Jai Hind and take care of yourself.